Welcome to the Minimalist CEO Podcast with Nate Lindquist. Nate created the Minimalist CEO method to help business owners redefine and grow their businesses by finding new demand in places they never thought to look, where there's no competition. By following his opposite thinking strategy, Nate's coaching clients have grown their business up to 40% in just 2 months and created tens of millions of dollars in revenue. Nate himself has launched more than 140 businesses. On the show, Nate interviews successful business owners and experts who share the secrets you can use to have a better business and a better life.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 7 of the Minimalist CEO Podcast. I'm excited to introduce our guest today. Real quick, a little bit of background on this guy. He's the president of All American Restoration, and he's in a tough space. So because a lot of people think they know what that is, but the way he's doing it is so incredibly unique and different. He's known as the Mold Medic and becoming known as that through his book, The Mold Medic, An Expert's Guide to Mold Removal. Welcome, Michael Rubino, to the Minimalist CEO Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Nate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for being here. Now, you're in a challenging space, man. Like, you're a young guy. We're going to learn more about how you got into the business. You got a great team. You're doing business in the millions. You're helping a lot of people, but a lot of people think they know what business you're in. And I think, let's face it, the restoration space is a jack of all trades business where they're like, I can fix that. Oh, water damage, no problem. Oh, fire. Oh, you had a storm. So if you could tell us about yourself, how you got started in your mold remediation business, and let's get down to it.
Yeah. So my dad has been a restoration contractor for 25 years. And what he does primarily is fire restoration. So as you mentioned, there's a big disparity about which type of restoration you want to go in. You want to do all of them. You want to do some of them. For me, I wanted to select a niche and go with that. And I moved back home right around when Hurricane Sandy. And when I say move back home, it means I came from completing college back to the area my parents were in. And, I said I wanted to work for my dad and kind of learn more about what he did. And construction was always curious to me because, let's face it, if you're a handy guy, things are a lot easier in life when it comes to owning a home, right? So as I started diving in, I started seeing a lot of mold, a lot of remediation that needed to take place. And I started basically heading up this whole sector of mold remediation for my dad's company, which was called JMC Contracting Corp. And little by little, I started going to homes, and I was the first guy at the door doing the estimate, managing the process, going from A to Z. It was helpful that my college roommate was in the mold space as well. He was doing mold testing. And so, I would basically get some jobs from him. I got some jobs through just my dad being in business for so long. And I really started to hone my craft. One of the things that really prompted me to focus more on mold is this job I'll never forget in Brooklyn, New York. I'm at this woman's house and she's really, really sick. And she's telling me how she just had remediation done a year prior, right at the onset of Hurricane Sandy. It was just one of these big national companies kind of flew in, like they always do when there's a big storm, they'll come in for this relief. And there's so much pressure on the restoration space when you have a big storm like that. You're trying to get in and get out as fast as you can to help the next person. And I can understand that type of pressure. Unfortunately, in this particular project, the remediation was done subpar, and we had to go back in and re-remediate. And so it became a common theme where every couple customers I would get would say they had remediation done in Sandy. And what we started to see is that, for someone who becomes sensitive one way or another, they actually need a little more care than what the industry standards are. And I can dive into that as much or as little as you'd want to, but basically we started really focusing on that niche. After a couple of years, the sector I was building in the remediation space, it became just too much to handle within the same umbrella as my dad's company. Happened to have this opportunity kind of fall into my lap. It was a company called All American Waterproofing that was looking to sell and get out. So I made an offer to buy the business. We sat down, came up with an agreement, and All American Waterproofing quickly became All American Restoration. And that was just May of 2017. Here we are, October 2020. Yeah. And things have really taken off, and I couldn't be more excited to tell you guys about it.
Yeah, this is great. So it's amazing. You're a young guy. You're in your 30s right now, and you got out of school. You decided to join your dad's business, a family business. And what was your degree in? How does one end up interested in construction and moving in that direction? Like, what did you have? You got your degree in college?
Yes. So I got my degree in marketing, which,
Okay.
Obviously in marketing, everyone who's a business owner needs to understand marketing, right? But it definitely wasn't in building science or microbiology, right? And I think I spent some years in marketing, and obviously I helped my dad with marketing, looking at new technology versus how things were 25 years ago. But I quickly really just got into the nitty gritty of the family business in restoration. And I started realizing that I really enjoyed that more than I enjoyed marketing. And so while I
you say that you come from marketing. I'm not surprised. I'm just going to go back to what you said earlier.
Sure.
You said you got in and you knew you had to choose a niche. So that is an intelligent statement to make. Now, I know choosing a niche means choosing at that time, choosing what you were going to be interested in,
Yes,
but also choosing what the business was going to focus on. Is that right?
That's true. Yeah, you're right there.
Yeah. So, and I think I also notice a fascination. You're talking about going to a woman's house during Hurricane Sandy. Is that what you said?
Well, it was shortly after Hurricane Sandy, but yes, that was the main culprit that caused the damage that she was concerned about.
And she had mold, and you talked about remediating. So it's interesting because I think about with Minimalist CEO, the number of businesses who have been using Band-Aid solutions, who have been doing hope marketing, gambling, hoping that they're going to improve and scale their business. And that's when I get the call at Minimalist. I'm a contract CEO, a growth advisor, and I work with companies to turn around, to scale, to grow. And what I find most of the time, is that everyone's being informed about what they can do with their marketing, but they're not being told what's the root cause. And that always goes back to helping systems. How can you help more people? Is it really helping? So I'm looking at what you were doing, and I think you had that figured out really quick, that just because someone had a remediation didn't mean that it was done right, that it worked, that it was getting the results. And you saw a sick woman in her home and you cared. So you have your feelers out there to care for people in a business. Let's just face it, when you look at the restoration space, it's not exactly the touchy-feely, let me care about you and your family kind of business. So tell me about, let's just go in here. How did you start to shift gears into becoming this niche remediation service for mold, and said, like, this is a health issue. Like, I got to care about people's health.
Well, it started there. And then I started seeing this pattern where I'd get a call. Somebody would have maybe hives all over them, brain cognitive difficulties, a range of symptoms that can accompany mold exposure and some of the byproducts that mold can create. And when I started seeing this pattern, in my mind, I'm like, this can't be a fluke, right? This has to be a real thing, because this is happening way too often for it to not be a real issue. And I started honing in on that. And I called my college roommate at the time, Corey Levy. I called his father, who's also been in the mold space for 20 years. And he's basically a pioneer in the industry of what he does. And, I started asking questions, why is this happening? How does this happen? And, they started explaining to me how things were working and what they were doing and why they were doing it.
Are you talking about from the mold perspective or from the property, or maybe a little bit of both?
I'm talking about, from the mold perspective and how it can impact somebody's health.
Okay, so you're going into a situation, you're actually looking at a segment of the restoration space, mold remediation, and you're starting to deep dive saying, I want a diagnosis here. These houses are sick. Is that, you're finding houses that are sick, and the sick house is making people sick. Is that right?
That's exactly correct.
So you're in a lot of ways, it's funny, your book's called, let me just look at The Mold Medic, right?
Yep.
So you're now going in with your medical bag saying, like, first of all, you're telling me these things that you're seeing, you're also having these things in your health. At what point do you start to feel tooled up that you can start to speak to these things with customers?
Well, I think probably about a year into it. I really, once I became passionate of it, for me, anything that I'm passionate about, I get obsessed with it. And I started diving into this. I started meeting with doctors, talking to doctors, seeing if they had clients who had the same problem where they felt that their home was making them sick. I started to ask them questions, what is it about mold that makes them sick? I started to learn about mycotoxins, which is a byproduct that mold creates. It's like a self-defense mechanism. It creates this toxin. The word myco stands for fungus, and toxin, everybody knows it's something that enters the body that actually produces a toxic effect. And I started looking at this, and I would have never guessed 5 years ago, prior to me starting this, that mold produces toxins. It's just something you never hear about. I mean, when I look back at mold in a snapshot in time, I look back at the way people used to do things, right? It was throw bleach on it, paint over it, right? It's no big deal. And there was never really this massive concern for the health effects that mold can create. And I think this led me down this path of really trying to understand, were we wrong? Am I going down a path that doesn't need to be gone down? And by learning more information and by talking to the clients, and when I walked into somebody's house, I wouldn't just assume they were sick or lying or whatnot. I would ask them questions. What are you experiencing, right? And I would start to correlate that with other clients. And the data just started lining up. It's like cognitive difficulties, allergy-like symptoms, skin reactions. And
did you talk to any medical universities, any doctors? Did you talk to any healthcare practitioners?
Yeah. So one of the biggest doctors, who happens to be very well known in the mold space, her name's Tanya Dempsey, and I got to know her by actually her having a flood in her own house and having some mold issues in her house.
Wow.
And I got to not only do the project for her, but I got to really understand like what she's treating people for, binders and all the different types of supplements that they'll put their clients on to help detox mold from their body. And one of the things we realized was, just like it'll make sense when I explain it to you from a logical standpoint, but if the client's being treated by a doctor, but they keep going home at night where the mold keeps entering the body, so as quickly as they're getting rid of it from the body, it's just entering back in. So the doctors started to realize, hey, remediation from a health perspective, especially someone who's sensitive and who's being treated for mold, they need to have their house remediated. And so we started, working with doctors across the country, this awareness, and it basically created this need to remediate properly. And so, we're helping drive the change that's needed in our industry by really educating people that yes, mold can affect your health, number one, and number two, it's got to be remediated right in the right manner, especially if you're sensitive to mold. And, there's autoimmune disorder, there's SEERS, there's all these different classifications that would make you sensitive to mold, right? So there's an internal body function that happens first, and then you become sensitive to it.
And now your business is sensitive to it, which means
now our business
you're aware. Yeah, that's brilliant. So as you're talking about this, getting this insight from a doctor, imagine the irony that this doctor who's an expert in mold now has a flood in her house, and you get to have these conversations. One of the things that we talk about a lot in the Minimalist CEO method is this idea of new demand, getting away from the competition. And I think you've really hit the nail on the head. One is the 7 new demand gold mines. And there's 7 questions that we teach our clients to ask that just open up their mind beyond the normal business. And you've already started to do that. You've already started to look at that. And it's kind of, I guess, diagnosing the things that most people ignore when it comes to building a business that actually helps. A lot of people are like, just sell more of this, go do more remediation. But instead of going to do more and get more projects, it sounds like you've gone deeper to make the work that you're doing more helpful, more quality, more meaningful. And now you also talked about your passion for it. Do you feel like with what you're doing, you've moved from being in a business to being on a quest?
Yeah. I like when I wake up in the morning, I'm excited to get up and go to work, and I think that's something you have to be really passionate about, because everybody knows what it's like to basically, get up and go to work and, not really feel like they're an important figure, like anything that they're doing is really productive. And I think that's really important. The fact that if you're not happy in what you do, you're never going to be as successful as you possibly could than if you were to find something that, would make you excited about.
Yeah, that gets you excited. You're on that. So in something that you're speaking to, it's very close to what I call discovering your true gifts and your calling. You've got the business piece. You've become fascinated with helping people. You found a place that you want to really dig down and share your gifts. It's called, now, can I ask you the questions of the gifts formula criteria to see if this
Sure. Let's do it.
Find out if you satisfy the gifts criteria in any business, you're positioned to grow dramatically. Now, you've more than doubled your business each year. You're on track to almost double it this year. You're in the multiple millions at this point. You got a lot of happy customers. So let me ask the questions. It seems like you're striking gold with the gifts formula. So let's look at this. If you pass this criteria, you're in good place.
Okay.
The first question of the gifts formula criteria is what you're doing causing you to give and causing you to grow?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's good. Is what you're doing inspiring you so thoughts break their bonds, dormant forces and faculties come alive, and become a person far greater than you ever imagined yourself to be? And when information comes along that tells you otherwise, circumstances come along that hold you up, your inspiration carries you through to do the work.
I would say, oh my God, yes to that one, because I would have never imagined myself as a published author at this point in time.
Okay, this is good. Published author. And the thing is too, what I see here is you're bringing what you're doing to the world. I almost see your business as a restoration and remediation. But then I also see there's a massive public service, public awareness campaign here that's needed, not just to grow your business, but because like, hey, other people in this space, they need to know what their work may not be accomplishing, and they might need your help for that. And that's something that we could talk about. That's one of those gold mines. They don't know the damage that they might be causing by not knowing the whole story. And that's
true. It's really true. I mean, the information that we're giving out is really game changing. You know, I did a conference at the Indoor Air Quality Association this past year, and you know, basically it's an industry type of conference where other industry professionals go there, and everyone. I was a keynote speaker where I got to talk about what I'm doing and how, you know, I've adapted the industry to really service this subset of the population that needs it. And, you know, the way in which they were looking at me, you can tell it's like, I don't really want to learn new tricks. I like what I'm doing. I've been doing it for 25, 30 years, and I don't really see a necessity to change. And I think that way of thinking, you know, is really not going to benefit people in the industry, because I see that what we're doing, the positive impact we're making to the environment around us, I really see this catapulting and being something where we go from a small niche now to later on, it's like almost I'm not working with anybody else type of scenario. And obviously there's going to be other companies that are going to get into this as things start to track and catch on. But it's really cool that we're able to help inspire the change and be a part of that.
Well, and I think there's something powerful in setting the standard. So we have the G is good. The I is good. The F is in the gifts criteria. Back to that is focus. Are you willing to focus on only this? Do your one thing that it's doing makes everything else easier and necessary. That's a quote from the One Thing book, which I love. Or you could talk about essentialism. The idea, is this the necessary few? Are you willing to focus only on this and say no to just about everything else so you can absolutely master it?
Absolutely. So there was a point in time where I had other businesses that I started and incorporated. And the idea was, well, I followed this old adage of, you know, you need multiple streams of revenue to make it in this world, right? And that was a measure of success. And I started to realize, man, if I want to grow this thing to a national level, like we've been kind of slowly doing, it's going to take a lot more time and effort than I'll ever be able to imagine. I have no time to work on other things. So all these other ideas that have popped in my head that are, you know, sound ideas, I've just said, you know what, forget it, because this needs all my attention if I'm going to grow this thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. So you got the F down, the focus. So the next is T. This is a loaded one: tools, talents, and teams. Now, there's a principle behind this. The idea is, are you willing to be resourceful instead of having limited resources? And the way that I describe it in the Minimalist CEO predictable demand method is when you ask how, you get stuck. It's like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to solve this? And we automatically want to go get a book. We want to go, it's like, wait a minute. If this isn't my gift, if this isn't what I was put here to do, if this isn't my quest, my calling, my one thing, if this isn't what I was supposed to put on this earth to help other people in my helping system, then I need to ask who instead of how. So if you look at how is huge, overwhelming, waiting, which I love. I love acronyms. I love analogies and metaphors. But for teaching, a teaching tool, how means huge, overwhelming, waiting. And the number of times where I see people teaching a course, teaching a program, but you find out, like in many, many spaces, that they teach a course like digital marketing, or they teach a course in, you know, a certain trade. Most people that take a course dabble.
Yeah, that's
a very small percentage that actually do anything effective with it to attain the objective that they had set out to accomplish when they signed up for the course. So learning is a delayer. Now, I'm not saying you don't want to learn, you don't want to grow, but it should be all focused on this one space. So if I'm looking at when I'm team building in any company, whether it's a $500,000 company, a startup, or a $20 million company, I'm always looking at, is this the one thing? And then I say, who can help out? Who can we plug in who's already getting world-class results in this space? So the T for you, the question is, are you willing to tap into tools, talents, and teams where they're going to be better at it than you are, where you can get resourceful far beyond your experience level, your skill level, where you can have some world-class people just win the day they start.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I can't claim to know every single thing there is about my industry, mold, microbiology, or a business owner, right? And so I think you always need to surround yourself with people who are better than you, who are smarter than you, that you can learn from. If you're the smartest person in the room at all times, you're never going to learn and grow, right? And we as human beings always need to keep expanding, right? And that's it. If you don't expand, you contract. So I have a business consultant right now who basically is more of an accountability coach, I would say. And what he does is every 2 weeks we hop on about an hour call, and he makes sure that I'm on deadline for all the things that I was supposed to complete between those 2 weeks where we talk, right? Mm-hmm. And so just having that part of it has been really tremendous for me because, as you know, being a business owner, if you don't get out of bed that day, nobody's there to hold you accountable or fire you, right? You need somebody that's going to really keep you focused, right? And keep you on target to really meet your deadlines and continue to grow the business. So I would say absolutely. I mean, I am open to surrounding myself with people like yourself who can help in ways that I never thought possible. And I'm always looking for new things and looking to continue to expand. Awesome.
Now, that's the kind of open mind I notice when the best leaders surround themselves with people smarter than they are in places where, you know what, that's not your one thing. So that's cool.
Yeah.
I dig it. Okay. Well, so let's go to the S then. The S is service. Are you willing to ask the question, how may I serve? And is what you are giving and doing for the world right now your absolute best, highest and best use of resources to serve the world?
I think so. Yeah, like I said, what we're doing is really an untapped niche. So I think it's really needed. And as far as service goes, just so you can understand the type of person I am, I'll lose money on a project to make sure that we guaranteed to deliver what we promised them. And it's happened before, right? Because we're in microbiology, we're in sort of an unknown. We'll have a project where we promise that person we're going to solve their problems. Here's the amount. This is the contract. And maybe when the post-test comes back, there's still a slight elevation somewhere. We have to go in and find it and do extra work than more than what we thought we had to do. Yeah. And for me, servicing the client is the most important thing, right? So money is the secondary. The money always comes if you do what you say you're going to do and actually solve somebody's problem. So service to me is more important than actually making money. And that's, I think when people lose sight of that and they focus too much on making money, they end up doing things that undercut their service, right? And I think for me, that's something that I'm not interested in. I will shut our doors before we lose our quality of service.
Awesome. So that leads me to this. At some point, you had to make the decision. I call it the S curve, but at some point, you had to make the decision to invest your time and your energy and even your team in going down the path of this mold remediation, the deep dive, really, really restoring homes. Did you have a moment where you're like, whoa, this is taking more time and more money, and it's happened on more than one job? We're losing money right now. We've got to get this. We got to sharpen the saw here. Did you ever have that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So give us an example. You don't have to tell us where or who.
Sure.
Tell us a story of when that happened, and what did you do to course correct? Because I'm noticing a pattern in business owners when they're like, hey, listen, my job is to get the feedback. It's not to always get it right. It's to get it a little better each time. So take me through the story when you got to that situation, and what did you do? What happened?
Okay. So basically what had happened was we had this project, we estimated it. It took way longer than we anticipated. And again, because we honor our agreements, we didn't go back and ask client for more money. I mean, that's not right? We honored our agreement and we lost. And the amount we lost was actually about $30,000. And that's a lot. I mean, just so you have a frame of reference, the project was a $60,000 project. So we had a 50% loss. So naturally, we realized we had to quickly turn things around, because if that becomes a pattern, you're out of business, right? So one thing about us and what I do is I graph everything. So I graph our sales each month so I can make sure the trajectory is going in the right place. And when the graph takes a dip, first thing I look at is, why did this take a dip and how do we turn things around quickly? The other thing is I actually calculate things based upon time and material, right? And when when a project's bid out to be a 15-day project, every single project I put 15 days was the estimate. And then I put what was the actual. And I'll look and I'll see what our average cost per day is and things like that. And I'll look at our net profit or net loss. And I look at it for every job. And it goes the reverse too. When you're making, an exorbitant gain on a project, you're at 80% profit margin or something. You want to look and say, hey, how could I be more fair? What did I do differently that we're not looking to kill anybody here. And so I look at both sides of the spectrum, really. On the bottom side of the spectrum, we lose a 50% gain on a job. We're like, holy cow. What I realized there in that specific scenario, we didn't bid enough time. We definitely didn't. There was a lot of unknowns there. And we need to, as a company, you need to give yourself some wiggle room, right? We left ourselves no wiggle room. In fact, it took almost twice as long as we'd anticipated. The second thing is, unfortunately, we had some challenges there based upon our process. And our process, it was working, 99% of the time, except for in certain climates, we realized that the sheathing, what they use in construction on the outside of the house, was more of a particle board. And a particle board is going to be a lot more porous than plywood. And so we realized, we have to inspect the outside of the house as well as inspect the inside. When you get this mold report, it tells you, what has to be done on the inside. And so it's easy to neglect what the house is made of or what things are like on the outside. And so what we've done is we've added that layer of protection by inspecting the outside to make sure that we're removing as many of the unknowns as possible. Because in restoration, you're opening up walls. You don't know what you're going to find 100% of the time when you open up that wall. So there is a bit of unknowns that you're challenged with, but the key is to really take out as many of those unknowns as you possibly can by doing a thorough inspection at the forefront. And since we've tweaked that and tweaked some of our process regarding that, we haven't had a massive loss like that.
That's huge. It's funny. I think and tell me what you think about this. It seems like the getting hungry to identify and remove unknowns, and then also not bidding a project just to sell it, but to bid it so you can sufficiently do it. I've noticed those are two major areas of problems especially in the construction space. It's the margins are too tight, time margins are too tight, so overpromising and underdelivering, and then not leaving enough profit to be able to have the cash flow to sustain the business in between projects. So I've noticed those. I'm hearing that pattern with you. The question that I have would be, what advice would you give to a business owner in construction, restoration, any service business where they've had some of the losses like you've had?
Yeah.
And now they see projects coming in and they're afraid to lose these bids because they're like, we got to get some cash in the door. We're going to be out of business. But then they get a pattern of tight margins, saying yes to jobs that keep their teams really busy, and not having enough of the cushion so they can sustain. What advice would you give them? What have you learned that you could just pass on? Because I'm seeing that as a common problem, and I want to see what you would do with that.
So interesting enough, as I told you earlier in my story, we ended up buying this business, kind of revamping it, changing it. And one of the things I noticed is exactly what you just mentioned. They were bidding on everything they can get in front of and were leaving themselves with such tight margins. And there's something to be said for being the cheapest guy also, right? So when you're a client and you're getting bids from other companies, most people don't want to go with the cheapest bid. They try to go for the middle guy. And you have to be good at sales to be the top guy and get that award. And we know that. So for me, the first thing that I said was, we're raising our prices. We're doing things way too cheap. We're having to cut too many corners to make money on this. And honestly, it's just not ethical. Right. So that was the major thing. And everybody fought me, right? We had a director of operations that came with the company. And the first thing he said was, hey man, I think that, raising prices, it's hard enough to get these guys work as it is. We're going to run this thing into the ground.
Young whippersnapper, what are you doing?
And I was like, hey man, just trust me, and now it's funny. We have this amazing dynamic because it took off, because we were no longer the cheapest guy. We were the middle guy, or sometimes even the most expensive guy. And that's okay. I mean, for us now, where we're at now, we're known as the most expensive company in the mold remediation space. And you know what? We own it. It's okay. It's okay to be expensive because.
Were you nervous, shaking it up when you got into the company the first time to say, listen, we're changing the way we're doing things?
You know what? I was nervous.
I'm right. I hope I'm right.
I was nervous, but I had this, I don't know, this intuition almost like, you know what? We're going to deliver a better product. So it's okay. We can justify being expensive if you actually nail the service end of it, right? If they get a better product, the service is impeccable, they'll be happy to pay for it, And that's the best advice I can give on this subject is don't shoot yourself in the foot. Know what you're worth, figure out what your product is, and explain why you're more expensive. Once I decided I'm not competing with the rest of the industry, I'm going to be a cut above the industry. That's when I really started to take off because there was a need for that. Nobody, when you're in the same pond doing the same thing everyone else is doing with the same pricing, you're not standing out. And everyone's just going to go with whatever estimator seemed to be the nicest guy that day, and that's not where you want to be. You want to build a brand, you want to build a reputation. And it's scary to be different, but honestly, it's what I focused on since day one and have had tremendous success with. So I'm happy that I took that chance and made that decision.
Well, that's huge. I love it. This is something that you said that I think if everyone took out their pen and wrote this down, the first thing you did, young guy taking over a company, raise the prices, decide what you stand for, so the brand, and make sure it aligns with the priorities of the marketplace. Obviously, that's what a brand's job is to do.
Sure.
Explain what makes you worth it, understand it, stand behind it, don't give in on that, and then create a reputation that you do what you say you're going to do. This is great advice. And so to have that at a young age when you took over the business and then go after it, have some of those early mistakes, when did you know that you were finally making it?
When did I know we were finally making it?
Yet?
It's so funny because when you grow, you just keep growing, right? And I was having this conversation the other day with a friend of mine. I was like, I feel like there's no point in time where you actually stop and smell the roses, because when you hit a goal and you reach some sort of plateau, right?
Yep.
The first thing you think of is, I got to make a new goal. I need a new plateau. Like for me, and I'm sure a lot of business owners are like that, you're really never satisfied. But I think after that first year, watching that 100% growth, I realized I was onto something. And I realized that was the momentum I wanted to build upon. Mm-hmm. And I was onto something. And I still think that. I still think that every day. I don't think I've made it. I could probably be doing $100 million a year and would still be like, I didn't make it yet, because it's business. It's this constant expansion. You just, sky's the limit, and you keep building.
That's huge. That's awesome. Well, before we wrap it up, we're having so much fun. I think we're just slightly over the time, but it's well worth it. I think our listeners will appreciate it. You have a book coming out that has to do with mold removal, The Mold Medic, an expert's guide to mold removal. And first of all, I'm looking forward to getting a copy of that, because I think that knowing that I had mold in my house growing up, I had issues with respiratory issues that for a time that were related to that. But could you tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah. So the book is called The Mold Medic. And what it is actually is really, it documents my journey into the mold space and what I've seen. And I'll give you guys some snippets here. The first chapter is called Honda versus Mercedes. And not to give so much away about the book, but I'll dive in really briefly. That whole chapter was written because I lost out on a bid with a client, which is really funny because I had bid on her other house and I had gotten that bid. But this time, I guess she just figured, hey, we'll hire a local company. We'll take care of it. No problem. Unfortunately, it did not go well. The project failed, and she had me come in to kind of analyze and figure out what had happened. So I was there on a consulting basis only. I sit down with this guy. I'm looking over the project, and I'm like, hey, this is not, it has all the red flags of this guy has no idea what he's doing, right? And I'm sitting down at the table with him, and I'm asking him some questions like, how long have you been doing this? He's like, oh, I've been in business 30 years. I do mold remediation, for 30 years, and that's all I do. And, so I started asking him some questions like, well, why did you do this? And for instance, in mold remediation, when you're doing the final encapsulation process, you want it to be monolithic, right? You want it to be all even one surface. What this guy did was he took a 50-cent paintbrush from Home Depot and basically painted the underside of the beams only. So if you look at a beam, it's going to have four sides: the underside, the side, each, left side, right side, and the top side, right? So he painted just the underside. So it's not monolithic. It's not actually doing anything. So I asked him about that. And his response was, well, we're like the Honda of remediation and you're like the Mercedes of remediation. And there's really, they both get you the same place, but you have a different way of doing things. It's definitely more technical and professional, but I've been doing this for 30 years, so I don't really see anything wrong with that. And so I talk about this story and give a lot more information on the first chapter, but it really dives into what's wrong with the industry, really what types of mold there are, how they can impact your health. I have a whole chapter in there. Dr. Michael Biamonte had given me a lot of information in regards to how it can impact the body and how to detox it from the body and things like that. So I have a whole ton of information from him that gives our clients some information on how to heal the body. And then it talks about what causes mold, things to check for in your house, how to find a good mold inspector in your area, how to find a good remediation contractor in your area, like what sort of questions to ask them, what to look for. And it really guides you through, if you have mold, how you can deal with it, and
Are they Michael Rubino certified, man? Because if they're not Michael Rubino certified, why would we want to call them?
That's true. If they're not Michael Rubino certified, you at least you could buy this book and figure out what questions to ask for to make sure that they're going to give you the best success at handling the home.
I think it's brilliant. I think the book's important. I'm going to be looking forward to having my copy as soon as I possibly can, because I want to share it with people, with friends, family, people out in who I know and care about. And I think probably the best thing people could find in the book is if there's a reference to how to get in touch with your company. So I think that might be the first piece of research. Speaking of that, now that we've covered so much ground, if people wanted to get in touch with you, now that we've had this, obviously we can put it down in the show notes, but where would they go if they had questions for you? They wanted to learn more. Obviously they can go to your company website, right?
Sure. So they can go to allamericanrestoration.com. Kind of a mouthful. I apologize for that. They can also email me at Michael, Michael, at allamericanrestoration.com. That's the best way to get in touch with me. It actually links with my cell phone, so I get the emails. As long as I'm not in a meeting, obviously, I respond back very quickly. And, I'd say introduce yourself, get in touch with me that way. And then, we can always set up calls to discuss more.
Well, I apologize in advance for the fact that you just gave out your email address on the podcast where tens of thousands of people.
It's okay. You can always. I'm always looking to connect with as many people as I can. So that'd be great if somebody feels that they want to reach out to me. I'm very excited to hear from you.
That's awesome. So, all right, well, perfect. I'm glad that we had the chance to have this interview, Michael. If there's anything else that I didn't ask, let's just do it. I'm gonna do this a la Tim Ferriss style. As a fan of him and his crew, I'm just gonna say, if there's a billboard and you can put anything you want on a billboard that you could share with the world and maybe with others who maybe they're in their small service business space. So you're gonna hit high traffic business highway with your billboard. What would you put on the billboard?
Now, I have a follow-up question for you. Am I advertising to gain more business, or am I just advertising any message I want?
Any message that you want.
Okay.
It's not a marketing message. Unless you want it to be. It's really up to you. But I think it's like, hey, listen, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people a month seeing this billboard driving by.
You know what? Honestly, here's what I would say, because I'm trying to be more philanthropic. I have a foundation that hopefully will launch soon that's going to give back. I'd say this billboard should say, believe in yourself and trust the process. Because if I didn't believe in myself, many years ago, I honestly would never be here. And, to write this book even, right? I mean, growing up, I had English class. I wrote, and the English teacher said I was pretty good. But I never nobody ever told me you need to be an author, right? And it never crossed my mind, but I had information that I needed to get out there, that I needed people to read and understand. And I needed to educate people on what's happening in this space. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote a book, and I believed in myself, and I trust the process, and I got it done. So I'd say believe in yourself, trust the process is what I'd want to advertise out there. And I think that if enough people believe in themselves and they really just trusted the process of doing everything you need to do every single day, like it's your last day, and keep moving forward, then I think everybody would be well off, and we live in a much better world.
Michael, this has been an awesome interview. Again, for everyone listening, I just want to share with you, I'm really glad that everybody had the chance to spend the time with us here at the Minimalist CEO Podcast. Thank you, Michael Rubino, for being our guest.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Nate.
Yep, you bet. This is Nate Lindquist with the Minimalist CEO Podcast, and thanks for listening. We'll look for you in the next episode. And in the meantime, believe in yourself, trust in the process, and do what you say you're going to do. And why don't you cut something away that isn't necessary, add something that has huge helping value, and then see if it's helping. We'll talk to you soon.